Welcome, everybody, to the Ultimate Advisors Resource Podcast. I'm your host, Jordan.Pence. Our company is Advisors Resource Company, and we help advisors like you write more life and annuity business. And today we're talking about a topic that gets somewhat, I get a lot of questions about it, and there's a lot of maybe mystery about this topic, and that's buy-sell agreements. And I think we in the industry have somewhat overcomplicated this, and it doesn't really need to be as complicated as you think. And so, what I'd like to do is just walk you through how to talk to the client about it. What are some strategies with buy sell agreements that you should consider? What are the best practices? How you should do it? And just some thoughts around that. So, anyways, first things first, how should you talk to your client about this? So, a buy sell agreement, like what is a buy sell agreement? A buy sell agreement in its basics is an agreement between two partners. Should one of the partners pass away, you could make it if they become disabled. It could even be if they don't want to work together anymore. But generally, what we're talking about is should one of the owners pass away, how are you going to dispose of that business from the deceased owner's estate? And so, how do you talk to clients about this? Number one, if you've got a client, like I'm sitting across the table from one of my clients, and they have a partner, and it's really a quite simple, and let's just say they're 50-50 for ease of the conversation. So if I have Jim and Joe sitting across the table from me, I would say, look, Jim, something happens to Joe and he dies. Do you want to be in business with Joe's wife? And sometimes they'll say, I don't care, that's okay, or whatever. But most of the time they'll say, not really. I'd rather get them out of the business. And then the question to Joe is, and both of them really, is Joe, if you die, do you want to rely on your partner doing a good job and continuing to grow the business to support your wife and family getting the value of the business out of it? And again, sometimes they might say yeah or some variation of that, but generally they're going to say not really. I'd rather them just get paid out. They get what they deserve and part ways. And so that is the point of a buy sell agreement. The point of the buy sell agreement is to set the value of the company, set the events that will trigger the buyout, and essentially remove the negotiation components of it. Um, get the family to get out of the business of the deceased owner, and the deceased owner can move along on their way. So I think you need to really instill with your clients, okay, should one of your partners or should your partner in your business die, do you really want to be in business with his wife and have her, um, or spouse, husband, whatever, but do you really want to be in business with your partner's spouse and have them come in and make decisions and want the same paycheck that your partner's getting right now, and just expect to run some of the business? And again, most people would probably say no. And so, well, that's fantastic. So how do you resolve that? And that is through a buy sell agreement. What you as the agents need to remember, or the advisors, the buy sell agreement and the insurance are two separate components. So what I've done now is I've established the owners here, in my case that I'm talking about, they don't want to be in business with their spouse, and they would rather their spouse get paid off from the value of the business at the time that they die. Their family gets that. Okay, so once you establish that, then you know the technical details come in, and that's when you obviously come to somebody like us. But from there, it's very simple. So you have two components to this. You have the agreement, and that is what the lawyer writes up and what it says. So that determines the value of the company. It determines who's buying what and how, and it defines the parties and all that. And then you have the insurance, and you know, those are two separate components. Just because the insurance is $5 million, the buy sell agreement doesn't dictate how much the company is going to be bought for. That just means part of your buy sell agreement is funded by insurance of $5 million. So the types of buy sell agreements are really two. So you can have an entity purchase or a cross purchase. So an entity purchase is Jim and Joe, right? One of them dies. Their company, Widget Co., will buy out the deceased owner's shares, right? So the company will buy out those shares, and now Joe owns 100%. Jim's family gets paid off, and they move along their way. The other option is a cross purchase. Again, Joe and Jim. Joe has agreed to buy out Jim's family directly for the value of the business. So how that works is Jim dies, Joe writes a check to Jim's family or Jim's estate to acquire the shares of the business. Now Joe owns 100%. Pretty straightforward. Now this whole Conley thing, and I don't want to get this into a Conley discussion, but you'll hear a lot about Conley when you talk about buy-sell agreements. And the only thing about the Conley was the buy-sell agreement was poorly written. So the buy-sell agreement was a entity purchase, and it was poorly written. And so the death proceeds from the life insurance actually increased the value of the business and create an estate tax problem. So that's like the high level Cliff Notes version. But so that brings on, okay, what's better, Jordan? Like, what should you recommend to your client? Almost always you should do a cross purchase. Okay. And there's a few issues, but generally a cross purchase is going to be better. And I've got a solution that solves some of those issues anyways, which I'll talk about later on in this podcast. But you've got entity purchase, which again has some positives. If you have multiple owners, you only have to buy policies on each owner and so forth. And then you have the cross purchase. Okay. So let's set those two things aside and let's talk about the insurance component. So when you're talking to the business owner, you could set up a buy-sell agreement and not necessarily fund it with life insurance, right? So you could have a buy-sell agreement. Me and if me and Maddie's helping me out here. So if me and Maddie are partners, right? We could have an agreement where our families would be bought out should one of us die from our joint business. But it doesn't necessarily mean we have insurance to fund it. It could be funded by a loan. Like I could go get a loan if Maddie died and use that to buy out her family. So just because you have a buy-sell agreement doesn't mean it's funded properly. So that's why we always use insurance to fund it, because it provides liquidity at exactly the right moment. And if Maddie's family has to rely on me continuing to be successful without her to be able to buy out her family, that's somewhat of a risk. So that's another conversation that you have with the business owner up front is, do you want to eliminate the risk of your family not getting paid off due to business performance? It could be something totally irrelevant to the skill of the new full owner. Like they could decide they could change tax laws with life insurance for my business, and then we basically go out of business, right? Not that that's going to happen, but You get the point. If you're a widget factory, they could ban widgets, right? Um, anyways, the point of all of that is to simply say a buy-sell agreement doesn't have to be funded with life insurance, but it should. And the conversation that you have around that with the business owner, and I'm wandering a little bit, but I'm going to get it back to a point, is if you're going to have the buy-sell agreement, let's fund it with something that we like, pennies on the dollar, right? Insurance provides uh, pennies for dollars or dollars for pennies. So you got a buy sell agreement. You've got that in place. You've got the agreement. You've got the insurance. So what type of agreement should you do? I think the cross purchase is the best way to do it. If you have more than two owners, or if you have owners with differing health situations, you should consider in 100% of the case an insurance partnership. This gets a little bit complicated. I'm going to try to do my best to explain it. But essentially what you do is you agree to a cross purchase. So if you have three owners with a cross purchase, right? You have Joe, Sally, and Jim, and I'm doing a cross purchase. Well, that means Joe needs to buy a policy on Sally and Jim, right, in case they die. And then Sally needs to buy a policy on Joe and Jim. And then Jim needs to buy a policy on Joe and Sally. So you end up issuing like 6 different policies. You got to hope that they make the premium payments on time and correctly. And it creates a lot of confusion. The best way to solve this is through an insurance partnership. So in that case, Sally, Joe, and Jim, they form an additional entity, a partnership, that its only job is to hold the policies for the purposes of a buy-sell agreement. And how this works, and also a secondary benefit, is when we're done with this buy-sell agreement, Joe and Sally can walk away with their policies, no tax consequences. They get to keep access to the cash values, everything. So this can be a huge benefit, because what I always typically say with business owners especially is, if you're going to buy insurance, why not take advantage of some of the cash accumulation benefits that are in insurance? You're already going to pay that premium, so why not leverage the policy in that way? So anyways, the insurance partnership solves that multiple policy issue. So you create this partnership that holds the policies. Now you only need 3 policies on the owners. If Sally wants to do an overfunded IUL, fantastic. Sally, do an overfunded IUL. You put your premiums into the partnership that goes towards your policy. Your capital account is tied to your policy, and it's fantastic. If Joe just wants to do term, he's older, maybe he's 65, wants to do term. Jim, maybe he's 55 and he's worried about his estate plan, so he wants to do a protection IUL. Fantastic. We can combine all those different strategies into one to cover this buy-sell agreement and do planning beyond the next 10, 15 years when these people retire. And I think that represents a really big opportunity to do just term, right? Like, I've heard this so many times. There's this misnomer out there that buy-sell agreements should be funded with term. And I don't know why people, I don't, well, I guess I understand why they say that, but that's not necessarily the case. It doesn't have to be. And if we're creative with our planning, we can make it not the case. So that's how you should do it. I mean, I've done this insurance partnership with only 2 partners, and I did it because health issues on one, or they wanted to do different things for policies, or or even just the amount of death benefit that we needed on one versus the other due to variations in the ownership size. And so I think you need to take a step back and use this as a even bigger planning opportunity. But anyways, insurance partnership is the way to do it. Furthermore, I would expand, and there's one other component that you should have. So we have carriers that will provide a complimentary valuation for your business owner clients. So get with those. We can get a complimentary valuation for you for your business owner client. I think that helps get the conversation going. Joe, Jim, how much is your business worth? I don't know. Well, if Jim dies, how much would you buy from from his family? I don't know. Well, I can get a professional valuation for you at no cost. Is that something you'd be interested in? Now you've opened the door to having this conversation, and go through us. We'll provide the valuation at no cost.
Yeah, Jordan, I actually have a few questions.
Fantastic. Let's do it.
Okay. So I guess does a business have to be a certain size? Is that where that valuation comes in? I guess whenever an advisor is looking at their book of business, what kind of clients are they looking for? Like what size of business?
It's a really good question. I would say any business that that has partners. Any business that has partners, we should seriously consider a buy sell agreement. And the reason why is even if you have a business where each partner is making, let's just say they're making 50,000 each, one of, I mean, that's worth something, right? Like 50,000 a year. Uh, I mean, it's at least worth 50,000, right? So, I mean, it's worth something. And should that partner die, the spouse is going to come around and say, well, I was getting 50,000 a year from the widget factory. Why aren't we getting that anymore? And I think I think that needs to be addressed. So I don't know about size, but definitely, I mean, they've got to be somewhat stable, right? Like a startup that started up yesterday is, I mean, what do they have? They don't really have anything. But if you're gonna do, some companies that's somewhat mature, they've been in business, they're probably gonna succeed. They've been in business for maybe 3 years. But I would start the planting seeds at that startup phase, even. So I don't think there necessarily needs to be a size, but it they got to be profitable, obviously, I think.
Right. Now, going back to the example with three partners, what if one of those three partners just wants out of the business? They want to leave. Do you handle that the same as if they died, or how do you handle that?
Well, that would be subject to their agreement, which they should really talk about. Um, so the agreement would spell out, like, if they wanted to break up, let's say, the agreement would spell out how much the other partners would have to pay uh that owner. So that would be in their documents, and it should be a part of the buy sell agreement, but um, it'd be a little bit outside of the scope of the life insurance person.
Yeah. Maybe the last question I have is like, who all needs to be a part of this conversation? Because this does kind of tie into your estate planning. Do you work with a trust company? It just kind of seems like there should be a few people involved in this conversation.
Depending on the advisor's role, I would definitely bring in the CPA. That's just good practice. The attorney I would bring in, I would want to know if they had an attorney that they were working with. Maybe, maybe not. Um, I don't know if I would bring in the estate attorney. But the estate attorney and the attorney who drafts the buy sell agreement might be one and the same. Um, but I would definitely, and if you don't have an attorney that'll draft up these agreements for you, um, come to us. We've got a number of them, but I would definitely bring to table an attorney that will write the agreement. I would not leave that up to chance, and I would be prepared to visit with that attorney and give them some ideas and listen to what they have to say. I mean, you don't we don't I'm not an attorney. I know how buy sell agreements work, and I wear glasses, so it makes me look smart. But I don't. I don't. I'm not an attorney, so
Mhm.
I would definitely try to partner up with a local attorney to you that you can rely on to help you make you look good in this area. And if you don't have one, call us. We'll help you find one.
Yeah. That's great, Jordan. So that's all the questions I have. So what's your takeaway for advisors?
Have the conversation with your clients who have partners. Don't get into the weeds with them. Get the information. Come to us. We'll help you design the plan. We'll help you implement the plan. Um, but it's really just having the conversations. And I think if it's me, the conversation I'm having with business owners that have partners is what's going to happen if one of you dies? And if they don't really know, then there's an opportunity to educate them on insurance, buy-sell agreements, so forth. And really highlight the problem with the do nothing plan, because you have to highlight that. If you don't highlight that, then you know they don't feel like they have a need, right? Like, oh, you know what, my wife will just keep getting the draws and that'll be that. Okay, if somebody said that, if a client sitting across the table and said that to me, and I'd say, so you want to put your wife in the situation to either succeed or fail financially, should Jim over here fail or succeed? You want to leave that up to your partner. And most people will say, yeah, maybe not. Maybe we should consider this buy sell agreement. So that's my take on it. And that's how I would approach it with your clients. And any client that has a partner, you need to be talking to them about this. And if you don't talk to them about, I'm gonna go around and talk to them and sell them some insurance. I'm just joking about that, but anyways, thanks everybody. Hope you found this interesting. We're gonna leave in the comments just our email address, and feel free to reach out. Uh, we could put some downloads with maybe some flow charts with the uh, the entity purchase and the cross purchase. That way you have some information to look at. But thanks everybody. Hope you enjoyed.